Welcome to 30 minutes of VOA Learning English, the Voice of America's information service for people learning English. Join us now for our daily magazine show, As It Is, and other programs designed for English learners. Again from Washington. Welcome to the program and podcast that is designed to help you learn and improve your American English skills. We do this by telling you interesting stories from around the world in a special way that makes it easy to understand. Today we have two stories for you. The first one tells us that some young students in the United States are getting free books in an unusual way. Then we are off to the high mountains of Nepal, as that beautiful country tries to encourage more tourism following huge natural disasters. So relax and enjoy our world, as it is, from VOA Washington. Up first is Marcia James and that story about free books.
Dozens of books that appeal to children are within reach at the push of a button. Stories about dinosaurs, elephants, knights, robots, and lots of other things. And the kids get a lot of encouragement. Ladybugs are dancing on Tippity feet. Tippity, tippity, happy feet. Where's happy feet? The initiative is a joint effort with a children's book company. The vending machines are located in a church, a grocery store, and a branch of the Salvation Army in Southeast D.C. Each machine is fully stocked with books, and children are allowed to take as many as they want. Isema Gibbs is Director of Corporate Social Responsibility for JetBlue Airways.
Making sure that kids develop a lifelong love of reading when they're really young is important to us, and we figure that that helps us have better future crew members or people to work for us.
Studies have shown that having books at home has a positive effect on children's test scores in school. It makes kids more likely to read for pleasure. Isema Gibbs explains.
Our program is based on trying to get books in the hands of children who don't have age-appropriate books at home. They could really touch and pick a book that was important to them, so nobody, no adult was telling them what book they had to take.
This year, JetBlue Airlines commissioned a study. It found that in some communities in the nation's capital, there was only one age-appropriate book available for every 830 kids. One book vending machine inside a church is one of three in a poor neighborhood with one of the lowest literacy rates in the city. Many parents cannot afford to buy books for their children. Tobacco Green is president and CEO for the National Black Child Development Institute.
They are strategically located in places where families naturally go. So in a place of worship and at a grocery store. I look at this as a way for families to begin building their libraries at home.
The kids are excited about getting a book to read and to keep.
The books tell you stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you don't read them, you don't know stuff. It helps me read better when I grow up.
I consider this a game changer. If there are other stores that are interested in bringing the vending machines there.
This is a pilot program, and it's uncertain whether it will be continued after the summer. Its sponsors hope to make book vending machines common in other communities so they can help increase literacy and a love of reading. I'm Marcia James.
You are listening to the Voice of America, and we are coming to you from Washington. It has been more than 4 months since 2 major earthquakes struck Nepal. The first one, measuring 7.8, happened April 25th. The second occurred 2.5 weeks later. The quakes killed more than 8,700 people. Much property was destroyed or damaged. Today, Nepal is struggling to rebuild its tourism industry. Foreigners and the money they spend in Nepal provide jobs for thousands of Nepalese. As we hear from Bob Doty, the country's Himalayan mountains have long been a popular area for mountain climbers.
Ramesh Prasad Pamalo works for Ecological Treks in Nepal. He spoke to VOA as he prepared to welcome his first group of hikers since the earthquake in April.
We are sending the 6 German people, to the mountain. Similarly, other companies, they are also doing. So there are few trekkers, they already, they're starting their trekking activities on the mountain.
The Germans are among a handful of foreigners who will climb Nepal's mountains this autumn. They have set aside concerns about the safety of hiking trails high in the Himalayas. This is a huge step forward for Nepal. Before the earthquakes, more than 150,000 foreigners came each year to explore its mountains. The first earthquake struck during the spring climbing season. 19 people died in an avalanche on Mount Everest. Rocks, ice, and snow damaged paths used by hikers. Ang Siring is head of the Nepal Mountaineering Association. He says his group has worked hard to reopen the mountains for visitors.
We are repairing the trails, bridges, and road heads. Some of the places we are putting the retention walls where there are landslides.
Their efforts are successful. An American-based engineering company was asked to study safety conditions. It found that trails around Mount Annapurna are safe for hikers. That has raised hopes among nearly 200,000 Sherpas, guides, and others that next year will be better economically. Because the earthquake interfered with the spring climbing season, many Nepalese earned little or no money this year. They hope the famous mountains will draw visitors back to Nepal. Pemba Jiralje has climbed Mount Everest 7 times. He is one of Nepal's most famous mountaineers. He says he is sure that the tall, snow-covered mountains will work their magic.
The mountain attraction is very unique and very powerful. This is a very unique natural power, very difficult to explain.
Fiona Marshall is with KE Adventure Travels, a company based in Britain. She says Adventure Travels will operate in Nepal this year after carefully studying the areas where it operates. She says her company is already planning trips to Nepal, although demand is not as strong as before the earthquakes.
Well, I think especially for the people who've been to Nepal before, and they know the country and they understand the geography, and they're keen to try on.
For Nepal, the return of mountain tourism is important to its recovery efforts. Millions of dollars brought in by overseas visitors are a valuable source of foreign exchange. I'm Bob Doty.
This is VOA, the voice of America. Coming up, more programs designed for English learners. You can read and listen to our reports and download MP3s at learningenglish.voanews.com. You can learn with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
For VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Recent killings by police officers have raised tensions in some American communities. The Washington Post newspaper reported that police officers have killed 24 unarmed black men in the past year. These deaths have led to anti-police demonstrations in several U.S. cities. The Maryland National Capital Park Police is reaching out to young people with a program called Cops Camp for Kids. The program started in 1998 as a way to bring the police and the community together in a positive environment. Lakeisha Robinson helps run Cops Camp for Kids. She has been a police officer for 9 years.
A lot of children that grow up in neighborhoods where they only see negative. I want them to see that we're not all just out here to lock everyone up. We're here to mentor. We're here to be a listening ear, because believe it or not, some of the kids don't have that.
About 40 children from 9 to 12 years old joined the program this year. They are learning about what it's like to be a police officer or cop. Police officer Randy Green showed his shiny black motorcycle to the children. They formed a circle around him. They asked questions about his job. The children watched in amazement as the police officer drove his motorcycle through an obstacle course. The children also got to learn about police horses. A police officer explained how to take care of the horses. She showed how the police train horses to ignore noises and other distractions. Afterward, the children got to ride on one of the police horses. The young people also went on a series of special field trips. They visited a Secret Service training center. The Secret Service is the agency that protects President Obama and his family. The campers learned about espionage on a visit to the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. The police also took the children to a courthouse to watch a real trial. There was also time for more usual camp activities: swimming, bowling, and laser tag. But for many campers, it was the police activities that make them want to return. 11-year-old Kaya Abui attended Cops Camp for the second year.
I think it's a really good idea to have the officers connect with the kids and give them kind of the insight on their job and what they do, so we see why they're protecting us and how much they love their job.
Officer Lakeisha Robinson says each camper shows that Cops Camp for Kids is a success.
And even now we have so many repeat campers that come back every year. And I just love it. It warms my heart because it's telling me that I'm actually making a difference.
I'm Ann Barrow.
From VOA Welcome to the Making of a Nation, our weekly program of American history for people learning English. I'm Steve Ember. We have been talking about Thomas Jefferson's second term as president. Historian Joseph Ellis calls it a disaster, defined by the trade embargo and the looming War of 1812.
When he leaves office in 1808, 1809, he really wants to get out of town and sort of lick his wounds.
In the months before he left office, Jefferson had signed a bill banning all trade with Europe. No ships could enter the United States, and no ships could leave. The purpose of the trade embargo was to keep America out of the war between Britain and France. But the embargo slowed the American economy. Many Americans opposed the trade ban. Jefferson's political opponents, the Federalists, used the issue to increase their strength in northeastern states. The year 1808 was, after all, a presidential election year. Thomas Jefferson had served 2 4-year terms as president. No law prevented him from running again, but Jefferson had decided years before that a president should be limited to 2 terms. Without such a limit, Jefferson believed, a powerful man might be able to keep the position for as long as he wished. George Washington had served 2 terms and then retired. Jefferson would do the same. Jefferson's Republican Party chose James Madison as its candidate for president. James Madison was Jefferson's Secretary of State. The party chose George Clinton as its candidate for vice president. The Federalist Party named the same candidates it had chosen 4 years earlier: Charles Cotesworth Pinckney for president and Rufus King for vice president. The Federalists felt sure they would win the election. They thought that Jefferson's embargo on trade had angered the people and turned them away from the Republican Party. Even some Republicans felt the election could go very badly for their party. But Jefferson remained calm. He believed that most Americans understood what he was trying to do with the embargo, and he believed they would vote for his party's candidate. Jefferson was right. Madison was elected. Thomas Jefferson left the White House in March of 1809. He believed the nation was in good hands with James Madison. He returned to Monticello, his country home in Virginia, and never went back to Washington again. Jefferson, who died in 1826, spent his retirement years following many of his interests. One was architecture. Jefferson continued building and remodeling his home, Monticello, throughout his presidency and retirement. The design was influenced by buildings he had seen in France and Britain. Monticello appears on one side of the American 5-cent coin, the nickel. Jefferson's face is on the other side. Jefferson also spent a good deal of his retirement writing letters. Historian Andrew O'Shaughnessy says Jefferson was one of the great letter writers of his time. One of his famous correspondences was with John Adams. Adams was the 2nd president of the United States. Adams and Jefferson had been friends during the first years of the United States, but politics had made them enemies. Their friendship ended after the election of 1800. Yet, in retirement, the 2 men became friends again. Jefferson and Adams had what Andrew O'Shaughnessy calls a remarkable correspondence.
They discuss the memory of the American Revolution and the history of it and how it should be written, but they also range over scientific and philosophical subjects.
Jefferson wrote about 19,000 letters in his lifetime. A project to publish the entire collection started in 1943 and is not expected to be completed until 2026. Jefferson also used his retirement to improve education in his home state of Virginia. Jefferson believed firmly in the value of education. His whole idea of government depended on the ability of citizens to make intelligent decisions. He proposed a school system of 3 steps. The first would be elementary schools, where all children could learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and geography. These schools would be built in all areas of the state and would be paid for by the people living in each area. The second step would be colleges, equivalent to the high schools of today. He proposed that 9 of these schools be built in the state. Students would begin the study of science, or would study agriculture, or how to make things by hand. These schools would be paid for by the states. A third step would be a state university, the University of Virginia, where students of great ability could get the best education possible. The university would produce the lawyers, doctors, professors, scientists, and government leaders. Young men whose families had money would pay for their own educations. The state would pay the costs of a small number of bright students from poor families. Jefferson also proposed that the University of Virginia be built at Charlottesville, a town near his home. Many of Jefferson's ideas for the university buildings came from the architecture of ancient Greece and Rome. Jefferson drew plans for the buildings. The buildings were very well designed. Work began on the university immediately, but it was 6 years before the school was open to students. Jefferson was there almost every day, watching the workers. He was quick to criticize any mistake or work that was not well done. When he was sick and not able to go down to the university, he would watch the work through a telescope from the window of his home. The cost of the university kept growing, and Jefferson had to struggle to get the legislature to pay for it. He also worked hard to get the best possible professors to teach at the university. He sent men throughout the United States and even someone to Europe to find good teachers. Finally, in March 1825, the University of Virginia opened. Jefferson's health had suffered during his years of work on the university. He was 82 years old and feeling his age. He suffered from rheumatism and diabetes and was so weak he could walk only short distances. He knew he did not have much longer to live. He told a friend one day, "When I look back over the ranks of those with whom I have lived and loved, it is like looking over a field of battle, all fallen." As his health grew worse, Jefferson turned his thoughts to death. He wrote how he wished to be buried. He wanted a simple grave on the mountainside below his house. He drew a picture of the kind of memorial he wanted put at his grave. On this stone, he wanted the statement, "Here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Virginia Law for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia." Jefferson had been governor of Virginia, Secretary of State, and President. But historian Joseph Ellis says it makes sense that Jefferson would emphasize his contribution to the Declaration of Independence.
Those are the magic words of American history. There's 55 of them, and we hold these truths to be self-evident. At the time that he wrote them, he didn't fully understand how important they were going to be. But they end up becoming the creed, the American creed, and that's his ticket to fame, the basis for his lustrous reputation.
But Joseph Ellis points out that Thomas Jefferson's reputation has suffered, especially among many historians. The reason, he says, is slavery. Jefferson owned over 150 slaves at Monticello.
He wanted to take the high moral ground and say that he knew slavery was at odds with the values of the American Revolution and the American Republic. A lot of people said that who were slave owners. But in the end, he says the federal government has no power whatsoever to do anything about it.
Joseph Ellis says Jefferson was against mixing of the races in society because he thought it would threaten the American Union. But he is believed to have had a relationship with a slave named Sally Hemings who lived at Monticello. In 1998, genetic evidence supported the idea that Jefferson fathered children with her many years after his wife died. The historian says one reason people still find Jefferson interesting is the contradiction between his words in the Declaration of Independence and his personal actions.
He is the most resonant figure in American history because he simultaneously wrote the magic words about freedom and individual rights and equality, and at the same time was embedded in the great sum of American history, slavery and racism, so that he stands astride the great paradox that is the history of America.
On July 4th, 1826, Americans began celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. But then, from Boston, came news that former President John Adams had died. His last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still lives." But Adams was wrong. At 10 minutes before 10 in the morning, on that same 4th of July, his friend Thomas Jefferson had died. Jefferson died at Monticello in his bed, surrounded by his family. As the news of the deaths of the two great men spread across the country, the celebrations turned to mourning and sorrow. Jefferson was buried the next day, as he had ordered, in a simple grave on the quiet mountainside. Thomas Jefferson continues to influence the United States, especially his words about freedom and democracy. And Jefferson's influence remained especially strong for James Madison. The fourth president had to deal with problems with Britain that Jefferson was not able to solve. James Madison's presidency and the War of 1812 will be our story next time. I'm Steve Ender, inviting you to join us each week for The Making of a Nation, our American History series from VOA Learning English.